Hey everyone, welcome back. Scrolling through social media feeds, we see influencer after influencer just flaunting their success stories, right? Almost like I manifested my dream life narrative. But let's take a step back for a sec. What about all the people who were using the same vision boards, hustling just as hard, but didn't hit the jackpot? That, my friends, is a prime example of survivorship bias in action. We're only seeing the survivors, the ones that made it to the top of the mountain. What we're missing is the mountain itself, littered with the stories of those who didn't quite reach the summit. Today, we're diving into survivorship bias, exploring how this sneaky mental shortcut distorts our perception of success and leads us down some pretty misleading paths. Let's rewind back to World War II. Picture this. Allied bomber planes returning from missions riddled with bullet holes. The military naturally wants to reinforce these planes to improve their survival odds. Seems logical to focus on the areas with the most damage, right? Add extra armor where the bullets hit. Enter Abraham Wall, the statistician who saw things a little differently. He pointed out the glaring flaw in this logic. They were only looking at the planes that survived. What about the planes that didn't make it back? Wald argued that the missing bullet holes were the key. Those planes likely sustained damage in vital areas, areas that proved fatal. By focusing only on the survivors, they were missing crucial information about the true vulnerabilities. Wald's insight revolutionized how they approached aircraft reinforcement, ultimately saving countless lives. This example really beautifully illustrates how survivorship bias operates. We tend to fixate on the success stories, the visible outcomes, while overlooking the failures, the data points that didn't make the cut. This creates a distorted view of reality, leading us to draw faulty conclusions and make decisions based on incomplete information. But let's move beyond the battlefield and see how this bias plays out in everyday life. Think about those articles you've probably seen about college dropouts who became billionaires, the Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerbergs of the world. These stories are often presented as evidence that a formal education is unnecessary, even a hindrance to achieving massive success. It's tempting to think if they can do it, so can I. But here's the catch. These narratives conveniently omit the thousands of other college dropouts who didn't become tech moguls, who didn't survive the cutthroat world of entrepreneurship. We don't hear their stories because, well, they're not the ones giving TED Talks or gracing magazine covers. This is where survivorship bias kicks in, skewing our perception of the path to success and making it seem much easier and more glamorous than it truly is. This bias isn't limited to the realm of business and technology. Remember that nostalgic saying, they don't make them like they used to.
Oh.
It's often used to praise the durability of older products, from cars to appliances. But hold on a second. The only reason those vintage items are still around is that they were built to last. All the shoddily made products from the past have long since broken down and disappeared, leaving us with a carefully curated sample of the most robust, well-crafted goods. This creates the illusion that everything from the past was built to a higher standard, a classic case of survivorship bias influencing our judgment. This same bias can even creep into how we view health and medical research. Think about those studies you read about showcasing promising results for a new treatment or therapy. It's easy to get swept up in the hope and optimism, but it's important to remember that these studies often focus on the patients who successfully completed the treatment, the survivors who experience positive outcomes. What's often missing are the experiences of those who didn't respond well to the treatment, who experienced adverse effects, or who dropped out of the study altogether. Take the COVID-19 pandemic, for example. During those uncertain times, it was incredibly challenging to accurately assess the true impact of the virus. Why? Because the official death count could only include individuals who had been tested and confirmed to have COVID-19. This inevitably left out a significant portion of the population, those who might have died from the virus but were never tested. This limited data potentially introduced survivorship bias, making it difficult to get a complete picture of the pandemic's true impact. But the rabbit hole goes deeper. One of the most significant areas where survivorship bias can really trip us up is the financial world. Think about it. When we analyze mutual fund performance, what do we typically see? We often focus on the funds that are currently in existence, the ones with impressive track records and shiny brochures. What we're missing are the funds that closed down, the ones that failed to deliver on their promises and quietly disappeared from the market. This creates an overly optimistic view of market performance, as we're neglecting to account for the funds that didn't survive the financial battlefield. So how do we navigate this treacherous terrain of survivorship bias? The key is to become aware of what's lurking in the shadows, the missing pieces of the puzzle. When presented with data stories of success or even seemingly convincing evidence, we need to develop the habit of questioning what we're not seeing. Who are the non-survivors and what can their stories tell us? Let's revisit that World War II plane example for a moment. Imagine if Wald and his team had simply followed conventional wisdom and reinforced the areas with the most bullet holes. It seemed logical, but it would have been a fatal mistake. By recognizing the crucial missing data, the planes that never returned, they were able to make a far more effective and life-saving decision. Let's bring this closer to home. Imagine scrolling through your LinkedIn feed and stumbling upon an article about a successful entrepreneur who attributes their success to working 16-hour days and never taking a vacation. It's easy to get caught up in that narrative to think, if I just grind harder, sacrifice more, I could reach those same heights. But what about all the entrepreneurs who worked just as hard, who pulled all-nighters and lived on caffeine, but didn't achieve that elusive success? Did they simply not hustle enough? Or were there other factors at play, factors that are conveniently omitted from these highlight reels of success? Survivorship bias tricks us into oversimplifying the path to success, making it seem like a straightforward equation of effort and willpower. This same principle applies to the financial world. When evaluating investment strategies, it's tempting to focus on the survivor funds, the ones with those dazzling track records that make you want to throw all your money at them. But to truly assess the effectiveness of a strategy, to understand the risks involved, we need to consider the funds that underperformed, that were forced to close their doors. Their failures can provide invaluable insights into risk management, diversification, and the importance of looking beyond the surface. So how do we arm ourselves against this pervasive bias? It starts with asking critical questions. What data is missing? Are there alternative explanations for the success I'm seeing? Could luck or other external factors have played a role? By challenging our assumptions and actively seeking out evidence that contradicts the prevailing narrative, we can start to see through the illusion of survivorship bias. Instead of blindly following the paths of the survivors, we can develop a more nuanced and accurate understanding of the world around us, making decisions based on a fuller picture. Let's shift gears for a moment and explore some less obvious areas where survivorship bias can really trip us up. Think about those profiles you often see of successful artists, musicians, or writers. They often paint this romanticized picture of a solitary creative genius, toiling away in obscurity for years, driven purely by passion, before finally achieving recognition and acclaim. While these stories can be inspiring, they fail to capture the full picture. They neglect to mention all the equally talented artists who never quite make it, whose work never breaks through the noise. The music industry, for instance, is notoriously competitive. For every band that hits the Billboard charts and sells out stadiums, there are countless others who pour their hearts and souls into their music, who gig relentlessly, who face rejection after rejection, but who never achieve that mainstream success. When we only see the success stories, it distorts our view of the creative process, making it seem like a matter of pure talent and determination, rather than acknowledging the role of luck, timing connections, and a whole host of other external factors. Let's take another example, one that might surprise you. Architecture. People often marvel at the durability of ancient structures, like the Roman Colosseum or the pyramids of Egypt. It's tempting to conclude that they just don't build them like they used to, that the craftsmanship of the past was superior. However, we're falling prey to survivorship bias once again. We're only looking at the structures that have withstood the test of time, the ones that have survived centuries of wear and tear wars, natural disasters. Countless other buildings from those eras have crumbled and disappeared, leaving behind only the most robust, well-constructed examples. This creates the illusion that everything built in the past was incredibly durable, when in reality, we're only seeing a biased sample. This bias can even influence our perceptions of personal experiences, our everyday lives. Let's say you're considering moving to a new neighborhood. You've heard from a few people who live there that it's a safe, family-friendly area with a great sense of community. Sounds promising, right? But here's the catch. You might only be hearing from the people who have had positive experiences, the ones who have survived the potential downsides of living in that neighborhood. You might not be hearing from the residents who have had negative experiences like break-ins, noise complaints, or issues with the local schools. Relying solely on those positive anecdotes can lead to a skewed perception of the neighborhood, giving you a false sense of security. One of the most critical areas where survivorship bias can have serious consequences is in scientific research. Studies that only analyze data from participants who completed a treatment or intervention can lead to misleading conclusions. For instance, imagine a study on the effectiveness of a new weight loss program. If the researchers only include data from individuals who successfully lost weight, they're excluding data from those who dropped out of the program or didn't see the desired results. This creates a distorted picture, potentially overestimating the program's effectiveness because it doesn't account for the non-survivors, those for whom the program didn't work. The implications of survivorship bias go far beyond just having an inaccurate view of the world. It can lead us to make poor decisions in various aspects of our lives, from our careers to our finances to our health. If we're not aware of this bias, we might base our choices on flawed assumptions or incomplete information, setting ourselves up for disappointment or even harm. Let's say you're considering a major career change. You're feeling burned out in your current job and are drawn to the idea of becoming a freelance writer. You've read inspiring stories of people who quit their corporate jobs to pursue their writing dreams and are now living the laptop lifestyle, traveling the world and setting their own hours. It's tempting to think, if they can do it, so can I. But it's crucial to recognize that these are just individual experiences, carefully curated success stories. To make a truly informed decision, you need to dig deeper. What about the countless others who tried to make it as freelance writers but couldn't make a sustainable living? What were their challenges? What factors contributed to their outcomes? Understanding the full spectrum of experiences, both the successes and the failures, can give you a much more realistic picture of what it truly takes to succeed in that field. This same principle applies to investing. If you're basing your investment strategy solely on the performance of funds that have weathered market downturns, the survivors, with those impressive long-term returns, you might be missing a vital piece of the puzzle. What about the funds that didn't survive, the ones that crashed and burned during those same market events? Understanding their failures can provide valuable insights into risk management, diversification, and the importance of considering factors beyond past performance. When it comes to our health, survivorship bias can be particularly dangerous. We often hear inspiring stories of people who beat the odds and overcame serious illnesses. While these stories can be uplifting, they can also create a false sense of hope, or lead us to believe that certain treatments are more effective than they truly are. It's important to remember that medical breakthroughs are often built on years of research, countless trials and errors, and yes, failures. Focusing solely on the survivors, the patients who responded well to a particular treatment, can lead to unrealistic expectations and potentially misguided decisions about our own health. Now, you might be thinking, this all sounds pretty doom and gloom. Is there anything we can do to counteract this sneaky survivorship bias? The good news is, yes, there are steps we can take. The first step, as we've discussed, is awareness. Once you understand the concept of survivorship bias, you'll start to notice it everywhere. In news articles, social media posts, casual conversations, even in your own thinking. You'll begin to see how this bias subtly shapes our perceptions and influences our decisions. It's also crucial to be mindful of the stories we tell ourselves. We often create narratives that emphasize our successes and downplay our failures. While it's natural to want to focus on the positive, it's essential to acknowledge our setbacks and learn from them. Failure is an inevitable part of life, and it's often through our failures that we gain the most valuable insights and experiences. By embracing a more balanced view of success and failure, we can develop a more resilient mindset and make more informed decisions. Let's talk about how we can apply this knowledge of survivorship bias to different areas of our lives. We've touched on business history and even personal anecdotes, but let's get more specific. Think about your own career. When you're researching different career paths or considering a job change, it's easy to get caught up in the success stories you see online or hear from others, You might think, if they can do it, so can I. But remember, those are just the stories that made it to the surface. What about all the people who tried those same paths but didn't find the same level of success? Their stories are just as important, if not more so, because they can provide valuable insights into the potential challenges and realities of those careers. The same applies to entrepreneurship. We're bombarded with stories of overnight successes and billion-dollar startups. It can be incredibly tempting to believe that if you just have the right idea and hustle hard enough, you too can achieve those same results. But the reality is far more complex. For every successful startup, there are countless others that failed. Those failures often hold valuable lessons about market dynamics, timing, competition, and the importance of adaptability. When it comes to investing, survivorship bias can lead us to make some costly mistakes. Imagine you're researching a particular investment strategy and see a chart showing the historical performance of a group of funds that followed that strategy. The chart might show impressive returns, leading you to believe that it's a surefire way to make money. However, what you might not realize is that the chart only includes funds that are still in existence. The funds that perform poorly and were forced to close are not included, which can create a misleadingly optimistic view of the strategy's effectiveness. So how do we counteract survivorship bias in our own lives? It starts with being aware of the bias and consciously seeking out a more balanced perspective. Here are a few practical tips. When you're evaluating a career path or business opportunity, don't just focus on the success stories. Talk to people who have tried similar paths, even if they didn't achieve the level of success they were hoping for. Their insights can be invaluable in helping you understand the potential downsides and challenges you might face. When you're researching an investment strategy, look for data that includes the performance of funds that have closed down. This will give you a more realistic view of the strategy's potential risks and rewards. Be critical of media portrayals of success. Remember that the media often focuses on the most dramatic and sensational stories, which can create a distorted view of reality. Don't let those stories discourage you from pursuing your own goals, but don't blindly accept them as the only possible outcome. Seek out diverse perspectives. Talk to people from different backgrounds, industries, and walks of life. Their experiences and insights can help you broaden your understanding of the world and make more informed decisions. By actively seeking out a more balanced perspective, we can start to see past the illusion of survivorship bias and make more informed choices in all areas of our lives. So the next time you're faced with a decision or are feeling inspired by a story of success, take a moment to pause and consider the non-survivors. What can you learn from their experiences? What are the potential risks and challenges that you might not be seeing? Remember, success is often a combination of hard work, talent, and a healthy dose of luck. Don't let survivorship bias blind you to the full spectrum of possibilities. That wraps up our exploration of survivorship bias. I hope you found it insightful and helpful. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep looking beyond the surface.